You've overseen some pretty big, incredible projects. And I feel like you're trying to use the government to do big things. Is this correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, small things too that are good,
But great things,
yeah.
Big, great things. You're trying to do great things again. So if I'm hearing this right, this infrastructure bill is trying to make America great again.
We're trying to make great American things.
Again.
I'm not big on again.
A return to greatness.
I don't love looking for greatness in the past.
Part 2, the return. More great, better, stronger, and greater.
I mean...
Back in 2020, every Brooklyn millennial I knew was dunking on Pete Buttigieg for being a teacher's pet McKinsey tryhard who made his volunteers do this dorky-ass dance. But 2024 Pete Buttigieg? Dare I say Pete 2.024? Oh, he is meeting the moment. He has become the Democrats' messaging messiah. Putting in so much camera time, my man is basically a Twitch streamer. So I grabbed a little bit of that screen time myself to talk with Secretary Buttigieg about high-speed rail porn, SpaceX, and why a mile of subway tunnel costs 10 times more than a Marvel movie. I also gave him something he hasn't given himself. 120 seconds of quiet, uninterrupted Pete time. What are you doing?
Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Pete Buttigieg.
Thanks for giving me Sure thing.
In front of the ribbon.
Very good.
Yep. Photo. 3, 2, 1.
There we go.
Go to camera and say how good this podcast is going to be for the American people.
Do you want the novelty scissors back? Yeah, okay.
It feels like you're on a press blitz run right now. But then you're also dealing with like real stuff. Hurricanes, negotiating with dock workers.
Yep.
You're also married, you have 2 children.
Yes.
How do you have time to do life stuff?
I have a husband who makes sure that time for the family is protected. I'd like to say I do that too, but he's definitely somebody who holds me accountable to that.
Do you skip washing legs?
Like
in the shower?
Like my legs?
Your legs. Yeah.
Like a quick. That would be the first place I'd look for time saving.
Because my thing is every other day.
I mean, I guess the soap is going to run down there anyway, so it's going to be clean.
Bingo.
I take the point.
Face, pits, cracks, triage everything else.
Probably the right sequence, yeah.
There's no way Secretary Buttigieg is like getting in the shins. No way. No way. You have been Transportation Secretary for 3 years now.
Yeah.
I want to play a game with you.
Okay.
It's called What Country Is This?
What country is this?
I'm going to show you photos of transportation infrastructure and you guess what country this is.
Okay.
Okay. First one. What country is this?
I'm going to go UAE.
Dubai, correct? This is a subway station in Dubai. Okay. Airport.
Singapore?
Bingo. It is straight up rainforest in the Singapore airport. Okay. Nice.
Yeah, that looks like one of ours. Yeah.
No.
No?
This is Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Okay. So not where I come from. Okay, because we got a couple like that.
You got a couple like this. Yeah, because
yeah.
I knew you were going to think like, is this Pittsburgh?
Yeah. Okay, Bosnia, huh?
Yay.
I want to know how America went from a world leader in infrastructure, and it really was this beacon of innovation and execution, to now there are roads and freeways that look like the former Yugoslavia.
Yeah. Well, you get what you pay for, right? So we went 30 or 40 years without really funding our infrastructure the way we need to. Everybody knew we should. Leaders from both parties said we ought to.
Yes.
The last president said that he would.
Yeah.
And it never actually happened. It's a pretty straightforward cause and effect. I'm not saying all you need is funding, but if you don't have enough funding, you're not going to have good enough infrastructure, especially if you're growing a lot, right? And obviously the U.S. went through a lot of growth, and we didn't really invest to keep up with that. And I think that was part of also like kind of a culture shift that started in the Reagan years, where we didn't really invest just in shared things, common things, public things like transportation assets.
Was there any simple factor statistic that you saw going into the job or getting the job that truly shocked you, that made you go,
oh yeah,
holy shit, this is much worse than I thought?
When I saw the condition of the Hudson River tunnels that link New York to New Jersey, that were in bad shape before, and then Superstorm Sandy accelerated the damage to them.
Yeah.
and found out that it represented basically the finest engineering of the Teddy Roosevelt administration.
Okay.
That's how long we'd had them, like 100 years. And then saw how much it was going to cost to do something about it and how long it would take, even if we got the money, which we finally did. But it's still going to take into the 2030s to complete that project, like well into the 2030s. And then you learn all the reasons why that's true, but it's shocking. When you learn how much it costs to build 1 mile of subway in our largest
We looked
cities.
this up, it was insane.
And higher than it is in a lot of other countries, which is something we're working on.
Yeah. Just here in New York, the extension of the 7 train to Hudson Yards, $1.5 billion per mile. Per mile.
Yep.
The Manhattan's 13 miles. Okay. Second Avenue subway costs $2.5 billion per mile, $40,000 per inch. The East Side Access Tunnel costs about $3.5 billion per mile. Jeff Bezos, only worth about 50 miles of tunnel. Doesn't even get you to Philly.
Hadn't thought of it that way, but
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you ever get sticker shock? Are you like, is James Cameron directing this tunnel?
So the question obviously is like, okay, what does it take to get that down?
Yes.
And why is it the way it is, right? And there's all kinds of reasons. I mean, part of why, for example, Second Avenue subway in New York is
Yes.
that it involves building around some of the most complicated and expensive real estate in the world, right? So you could build that much subway line physically
Right.
in the middle of South Dakota, and it would not cost anything like that. It's not the cost of boring. The tunnel's actually already there. It's
correct.
it's putting in the stations and buying and potentially tearing down buildings that are expensive. It's kind of those kinds of things. But there are some bigger structural things that I think we need to work on. Right? 'Cause we don't actually directly build anything in the U.S. Department of Transportation. Federally, we don't build the roads or the highways or the subways.
So
we
who
fund.
does states and cities?
It could be a state. It could
Okay.
be an entity like the MTA, right? A transit authority. It could be an airport. It could be a city. But we're working through a lot of those layers. And sometimes there are so many of those layers, or so many parties are at the table, and they have competing politics, and they have competing priorities.
Do you think the government can effectively allocate this money? I mean, I'm just speaking for me as a voter and as a citizen.
Well, I think what we got to figure out is what are the things that are best handled by the government allocating capital, and what are the things that are best handled by the private sector doing it? And I would take an analogy from a different field, which is tech, right? So in tech, consider the iPhone. I don't think the federal government could have ever invented and manufactured an iPhone. I definitely would not want a smartphone invented by, I can just imagine that it would not be very elegantly designed, right?
Sure, the smartphone brought to you by the DMV or something like that.
Only the private sector could create something like that.
Got it.
But the internet was literally invented by the federal government. And the private sector never could have developed something like the internet itself. Sometimes a $1 trillion idea, like nuclear fission or the internet, can only come about through publicly funded research. And then the multi-billion-dollar ideas, like a smartphone, are built on top of that, right?
Right.
So I think similarly in the transportation infrastructure side, there's always a give and take between the things that industry should do and the things that the government has to
Can you
do.
give me a specific example of that?
Yeah, I'll give you two. So one, I think we are finally close to experiencing true high-speed rail on American soil. We have funded a project that'll connect Nevada to Southern California.
Secretary Buttigieg. I mean, I'm not one to fact check, but I'm telling you, this is not.
It's going to happen.
I'm telling
It's
you. like,
gonna happen.
I do not believe you.
It is.
And I'm not going to be dishonest. I have such respect for your team and like for your office, but I'm telling you, I couldn't even hold a straight face.
It's going to happen, probably. So a lot of things have to go right, but here's my point. We're working with private sector players who have built good rail on American soil.
Okay.
We're partnering with them to fund a line that will connect Nevada to Southern California that is aiming to be done in 2028 that they couldn't do on their own without federal support. And the second thing I would point to is EV chargers. So we have federal funding that we're doing partly through the states, partly on our own, that by the end of this decade will bring a lot of chargers online to help meet the president's goal of having 500,000 by the end of the decade. That's another example where we're not taking on board getting all the chargers done. Private sector is going to do a ton of that. But we also know that there will be critical gaps in the network.
Right.
So there really won't be the network
that
it needs to
fundamentally
be.
are not profitable, that the government has to come in and
or they're not
subsidize.
profitable yet. That's where we can. By the way, this has happened before. Aviation. Like the U.S. aviation system really wouldn't have worked if there hadn't been a lot of New Deal public investments in getting a lot of airports up and running so that you had enough of a hub and spoke system so that airlines could function.
I don't know if you've seen this. This is a meme that's been floating around the internet. Okay, this is a high speed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
This is pornography for transportation. It is a dream. It is a fantasy. People have said it's creating unrealistic expectations for the youth. But it's all over the internet, and we have to deal with this. Please tell us what we need to do to make this a reality.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is what we're working on, right? It's not going to be a network overnight. I mean, the way you do this is you start putting in the pieces. We're doing the Las Vegas to LA, we're doing another north-south one in California. It's going to take longer, but we've invested a lot in that. There are projects being discussed in Texas, Dallas to Houston, in the Pacific Northwest, and in several other locations where there's a lot more work to be done.
You know my pitch, how this would get done overnight, just like this.
What's that?
Say we're using trains for war. It would get done overnight. If we fought wars with trains, you want to stop the terrorists? We got to build this train. You tap in the military-industrial complex, whoo, Hyperloop would have happened. Trains for war?
I could try it in Congress.
Just say, if we don't do this, the terrorists win.
Next time I'm testifying in the House, I'll say that.
What makes that meme so sad is there's actually a feeling that we feel like we don't deserve it. It seems like such a pipe dream that as a society we don't deserve it. And there was this quote, very famous Margaret Thatcher quote, that I think about deeply, and obviously Thatcher and Reagan were two peas in a pod. She says, quote, "There is no such thing as a society. There is only individuals and families." To me, it feels like we're living inside of that quote. All the things that you mentioned, EV charging, high-speed railroad, affordable railroad, all of these things are part of a greater society. And what has happened with the American dream is that is kind of ossified and corroded. So it's all about radical individualism. And is there a guiding principle that is a counter to that kind of nihilistic worldview?
Look, the problem with that, it's kind of self-fulfilling, right? If you come in with that worldview and you start undermining the ability of public institutions to deliver, then people notice that their institutions aren't delivering, probably because they've been starved for resources. And then they become cynical about those institutions. And then they become unwilling to vote to have those institutions have enough resources to deliver. It's a spiral, right? But there's an equal and opposite virtuous cycle you can get going. Of course we live in a society. The moment you step on the subway, right, you know you're in a society because you are having a common experience with people who you don't know and who have radically different backgrounds than you, going to similar geographic places to do different social or economic things, whatever everybody is going about their day, whatever you're doing, going to work, going to church, going to meet a friend. And that's true if you're in a big city on a subway, but it's true if you're on a bike path in rural Michigan where I live. Transportation very literally, but also like symbolic, or it connects us, right? And it reminds us of the fact that our experiences are not just things that happen in isolation. Like we travel together with total strangers all the time, whether it's on a subway or on a freeway or on a sidewalk. And our individuals and our individual families interact with each other in our culture, in our society, in our economy, and definitely in our transportation.
Do you think there's an
systems.
incentive for it? Say libraries didn't exist. Try pitching the idea of a library in 2024 to any company. They go, this is not profitable. How could we have this be in every, and they get to keep the books forever, and anyone can use it. And just people can use the internet there, and who's paying for this? Why are we doing this? It wouldn't exist. It simply wouldn't exist. But to me, those are these little moments, the train, the library, where you're like, no, we are part of something greater, a greater collective that's beneficial to everybody. And
so there is this kind of instrumental thing where if we take care of shared things and get them right, whether we're talking about national security or whether we're talking about drinking water or whether we're talking about transportation, like that helps you. But also when you start talking about things like libraries, we're also talking about not just something that is useful to us as individuals and as families, but also something that helps speak to the purpose of everything else, right? Like, I think it was John Adams who had this quote about I must study politics and war so that my sons may be at liberty to study things like literature and history. I'm not saying it
Oh wow,
exactly
John
right,
Adams
but like,
thought his kids were going to become improvisers in one generation.
Yeah.
They're going to be like screenwriters.
No, yeah,
and
the
take
quote
improv
actually goes
class.
2 generations deep.
Oh, got
By
it.
the end, they were into stuff like porcelain,
Oh,
which I
gotcha.
guess was like one of the fine arts you would study back
Gotcha,
then.
okay.
Obviously, it didn't quite work out that way generationally,
yeah,
but like the
for
point
sure.
is like the more we take care of that in our generation, the more like a future generation gets to focus on like things that are like a higher calling, including culture and thinking, literature, you know, the kinds of things that libraries foster.
Totally. When you look at history, was there an innovative spirit within the government in the mid 20th century? Whereas for me, it feels like right now in the 21st century, it starts from the private sector leading the way in terms of innovation, and the government has to slowly keep up.
That's
Where I'm
kind
like,
of the brand,
oh,
right?
there's, you know.
But that's the thing, that's the brand, right? Is the private sector does the clever thinking and the government kind of plods along.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's more understanding which pieces each sector does better. I mean, again, the literal invention of the internet. Typically what happens is those things mature and then the private sector can do more with them. Space program is another example, right?
Got it.
Commercial space activity
Yeah.
is one of the biggest growth areas that our department is dealing with now. And it's great that there's commercial players doing more and more of that. But that never could have happened if you didn't first have a federal program.
There's this thing that when you get interviewed, a lot of people are, well, how much time is it going to take? And you keep saying, listen, guys, it's going to take time. But are we doing anything to try to build faster in America? One, and then number two, how should voters and the public realistically look at how long it's going to take?
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite subjects. I'll try to be concise about it.
Yes.
But part of it is, what are we as a traveling public willing to accept? So for example, I've had a lot of conversations with my German counterpart. They're doing a massive rail upgrade in Germany that will expand capacity. They've needed to do it for a long time.
Okay.
They've made the difficult decision to do it more quickly by having service go completely offline for certain parts of their rail system. You just got to take a bus for a while.
Oh, wow.
It's just literally not there.
Got it.
And over the course of about 5 months, they're going to do what otherwise might have taken years. I just don't think that would work.
There'd be mutiny in this country. Yeah, there'd be mutiny.
You know, right? But I do think we should ask ourselves, okay, what level of disruption are we willing to take in order to have a project go more quickly, in order to have it go more efficiently? We're never going to do it like China, right? To be clear, the reason they can build so quickly in China is, first of all, very different labor conditions.
Yeah.
And secondly, if Xi Jinping wants to build a railroad or a road through your house and you don't want it there, too bad, right? We don't do that. We have done that, by the way, in the US, right? What has happened historically is that things were built, and usually they were built through whatever community or neighborhood had the least power to resist or reshape that plan.
Right.
The fact that we're not doing that, which is a good thing, right? The fact that we take account of communities does mean you have to take more time to figure out how to get it right and do those trade-offs. So
don't you feel like a little espresso shot of dictatorship would help us, though? A little bit. And by the way, you're extremely...
Espresso shot of...
just a little. And I'm not talking about full-on capital D dictator, but I'm talking about a benevolent dictator, like a Lee Kuan Yew. Like Singapore, 1959 to 1990, what a run.
yeah,
What a run.
I would say any kind of dictator is just not going to be our speed.
I want to pivot to Elon Musk and SpaceX. SpaceX, fun fact, actually falls under your purview with the FAA. As we've seen in our lifetime, SpaceX has been a step function when it comes to space and satellite innovation. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Is it safe to say that it is working from a cost, efficiency, and results standpoint?
Well, I think they're working as a business, obviously. But our job isn't to sit there and say, like, is your business efficient or not, right? Our job is mainly to make sure that it's safe.
Got it.
So whether we are regulating Boeing or SpaceX or...
Well, Boeing's an example of it not working, in my opinion.
That's where I'm going. So, well, yes and no, right? So obviously profound problems at Boeing,
Yes.
right? But we also see those problems because we have such an intense level of scrutiny and expectation. Anytime you have a breakdown like that, you have to look at how regulation should have been done better, as well as the behavior of that company. But my overall point is, we've achieved something as a country over the last few decades in aviation safety that I only wish were true on something like vehicle safety. And what I mean by that is, enough people to fill a Boeing 737 died today on our roads. And it happened yesterday, and it's going to happen again tomorrow. It doesn't even get a headline.
Wow.
We got a 3 or 4% improvement over the last year. That's off of 40,000 a year. But we don't have the same culture that we do around commercial aviation, where the only level of crash fatalities we're going to tolerate any given year is 0. So when we set 0 as the goal for vehicle safety, we got torn apart by columnists saying this is like an absurd pie-in-the-sky goal. And I'm thinking, if we can have, in a typical year, hundreds of millions of people get on an airplane, fly through the air at nearly the speed of sound, miles above the ground, propelled, by the way, by flammable liquids the whole way,
Yeah,
right?
it's wild.
And arrive safely, surely we can do that in other modes of transportation. Now, this brings me to SpaceX, or any commercial space in general, right? This is a much newer thing for the FAA to be dealing with than commercial aviation, which has existed in some form for about 100 years, right? And we used to license like maybe 1 launch a month, and now it's more like 1 a week, and it's getting faster and faster. And I'm not just talking about space tourism. I'm talking about these satellites going up the country,
the satellites and the renewable. You're talking about the renewable rockets as well.
That too,
Falcon
right,
9
yeah.
launch.
So let's be clear. These are fascinating and extremely impressive achievements.
Yes.
Our job is to make sure that they're safe. In order to get to space, you have to go through the national airspace, which is the most complicated commercial airspace in the world, the U.S. national airspace, with 40,000 FAA guided flight operations going on any given day.
Yeah.
Right?
Am I thinking about this the right way, where I feel like innovation this way, vis-a-vis SpaceX, Falcon, all the Falcon launches, the innovation this way vertically, from ground to sky, has been unbelievable over the past 20 years.
Yeah.
But innovation this way, laterally, just in terms of high-speed trains and super high-speed trains, has somewhat stagnated. Am I thinking about this the right? Am I seeing it the right way?
I don't disagree. I think there are some very important innovations happening on surface. The most important, even though it's not happening quite as fast as was hoped, it's still happening, is the AI function of driving, right? Because we're pretty close to an event horizon where at least for a personal vehicle, where the robot's probably a better driver than you are or than I am. That's probably already true, or we're very close to it.
Yeah. My brother-in-law did a ride in San Francisco. They have this.
Yeah.
And he does the full ride with his kids, with his children.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're crazy. He's like, I'm telling you, I'm not.
Well, remember, the average driver thinks they're better than the average driver, right? So we all are more comfortable if we think we're in control. My point is, given the murderous track record of human drivers, killing about 40,000 people a year, if we actually get through that event horizon, that is a huge development that will literally, if you just run out the numbers, mean potentially, over time, hundreds of thousands, just in our lifetime, hundreds of thousands of prevented deaths.
What you're saying logically totally works, Secretary Buttigieg, and you are a very logical person, but there's something about, I can accept vehicular manslaughter, because Tyler had one too many and he ran me over, but there's something profoundly evil about a robot doing it.
Yeah, that's the problem.
That makes it like unacceptable. This shall not happen.
This is a real issue. So, first of all, we got to be very conservative about this because it is new technology and we don't want bad things to happen.
Yeah.
But doubly so, because public acceptance, even if it's 4 times safer than a human driver, we wouldn't really accept robots killing 10,000 people a year, even if human beings are killing 40,000 people a year as drivers.
That's the wild thing, yeah.
Anyway, my point is, I know that's not as sexy as like going to Mars, but in terms of the human lives at stake, I would argue that's maybe a bigger and more important leap.
Let's talk about Project 2025, the No Nut November of government policy. Among other things, it proposes to ban pornography, restrict abortion, eliminate the Department of Education, end student loan forgiveness, roll back LGBTQ+ rights, promote oil and gas. What aspects of Project 2025 would impact the Department of Transportation?
Well, if I understand the proposals correctly, among other things, they would pretty much get rid of all discretionary grants out of the Department of Transportation. That's the part of our infrastructure funding where we go through applications from communities saying, we want to build this new bridge, it's going to help connect a community that's not been connected, or we want to do a resilience project to move our port higher above sea level because sea level's rising. Or we want to put in a bike lane, or you name it, like all kinds of wildly important projects that we do. And this would just get rid of it. And if congressional Republicans were to go that path, which I think has been laid out in this policy document of Project 2025, so many of the best projects that we're doing in America right now wouldn't be happening. And the thing that kills me is even even the members of Congress who voted no on creating these programs are very enthusiastic on using those programs to benefit their communities. So the projects they're funding are good projects.
Yeah, right.
Because they do press release, they do letters to me saying, pick this project. They do press releases if I do. I don't know. I think it's wildly out of the mainstream of what most Americans, regardless of what party you belong to, expect from our transportation policy.
Do you also feel a frustration the fact that just depending on the way party structure works, that all of this momentum could be for naught?
Sure, yeah.
At the turn of an election.
Yeah, of course. Although we try to make things durable, right? Like good projects, get them underway. But my point is something like the child tax credit.
Yeah.
They passed the child tax credit, and the next year, child poverty was down by like half because it's a tax policy. It's a stroke of a pen. People's economic circumstances change. It just happens. Whereas getting the results on the stuff we're talking about, the individual projects, let alone the network effects like getting the ball rolling on high-speed rail or having a truly built-out EV charging network, which really to do at the scale that we want to do, that the president wants us to do, is at the end of the decade, kind of at the soonest, right, to really be fully articulated. So that's a frustration on one hand. On the other hand, it creates a discipline that I think is really helpful. Because so often in politics and public policy, you're thinking about basically 4 years, up to 4 years, right? And if you don't see some kind of reward for doing something in 4 years, politics would tell you it's not worth doing. 2 years for a lot of people.
Sure, right.
But when
long-term thinking is not incentivized. When you have 2 to 4 years.
But I live in a long-term world, right? Like if we get it right or if we screw it up on something like how a bridge ought to be built or where a new deepwater port might belong, people will be living with that, in the 2100s, which I hope and expect my kids will live to see. Right now we're living with decisions of people for good and for ill. Sure. People now are living with decisions that were made 40, 60, 80 years ago, and we're making those decisions. Yeah. So rightly understood, doing infrastructure work compels you to understand that public policy is a long game because the stuff you're building, the things you get right, and the things you don't get right will play out in a way that people will be able to look back on and physically see.
Sure.
Like point to
when
the
you
bridge.
walk to Grand Central or when you look up, you're like, wow.
30 years from now.
By the way, that's a moment when I walk through Grand Central, I feel like I'm part of a society. I can't help but not look up.
Yeah.
Whereas when I take a bus or I'm on the subway, I can't help but just look down. I'm like, don't look up. You will get stabbed.
You're still part of a society.
I want to end by giving you a gift, okay? I want to give you something that is long overdue. 2 minutes of downtime. No hurricanes. No bridge collapses. Nobody tweeting you about flight delays. Just 120 seconds.
Wow.
Of being. I'm going to light the scented candle here. I'm going to start with just 2 minutes of just no talking. Because I know you have to run to another appearance, so just... Are you serious?
There's too many things going on.
You're less than a minute and 20 seconds.
If I'm awake,
oh my goodness gracious, you couldn't.
There's too many things going on.
Secretary Buttigieg, thank you so much.
But this is really good. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you.